In early 2025, as I walked past movie theaters, I often noticed a poster for the Chinese film The Shadow's Edge. I wouldn't call myself an expert in Chinese cinema, although I do know respected directors such as Wong Kar-wai, Johnny To, and Ringo Lam. But what caught my attention was the Jackie Chan on the poster. I grew up on Hong Kong action movies, especially those from his American period. But in any case, Jackie Chan is a true legend, and for me personally as well, since I watched many of his films as a kid and know him more as Uncle Jackie. He performed all his own stunts on set, and it was thanks to him that I discovered Chinese cinema and the legendary Bruce Lee back in the day. Back then, I simply forgot about the film and only remembered it a year later. Eventually, I watched it, and my feelings were mixed. The film was directed by Larry Yang, whom I honestly hadn't heard of before, but judging by the reviews, he had previously directed the decent film Ride On, starring the same Jackie. With a budget of 20 million, the film grossed $181 million at the box office. The story follows the confrontation between two professionals, an experienced criminal named Fu and a police officer named Wong. Fu carries out a series of robberies with his gang of adopted sons. To catch them, the police turn to Wong, a professional who has already retired. They ask him to help capture the gang, and he decides to work using old-school methods, assembling and training a surveillance team. The film turned out to be a very solid action movie in the Hong Kong traditions. It has bright, memorable, and well-choreographed fight scenes, but I still have a couple of serious complaints. The film's biggest problem is its editing. Throughout the entire runtime, it's way too fast. The shots change so abruptly that you constantly lose your sense of space and can't always understand what exactly is happening. Usually, there's a reason for fast editing in films, for example to save money or hide certain weak moments, but here it just seems unnecessary. The frames literally flash before your eyes. The first 20 minutes were physically hard for me to watch, and I think that the super accelerated pace might even make some viewers feel sick. For example, the scenes where Jackie Chan's character is introduced. I understand that the filmmakers wanted to show a dynamic montage of him pulling off cool moves like a boss. But why make 1 second shots where the camera angle changes 3 times? 3 times in 1 second, Carl. Some of these shots literally last 5 milliseconds, and there are plenty of moments like this throughout the entire movie. This chaotic editing only makes things worse. Right at the start, you're literally thrown 5 characters from each side, plus a few more minor characters, and there are always some extras hanging around the main characters, on whom the camera seems to catch. As a result, you just sit there wondering, is this one of the main characters or just a random background guy? You haven't even had time to properly remember some of them, while new ones keep popping up on the screen. Because of that, the plot feels overloaded. There are simply too many characters, and many of them don't play any significant role. Honestly, I watched almost the entire film remembering only Wong's name, simply because you don't really get the chance to remember anyone else. On top of that, the film constantly jumps between different scenes. In one moment, the characters are running somewhere. Then, suddenly you see someone changing clothes. Then, it switches to another character doing an exact same thing. Plus, the characters are constantly changing outfits, which makes the confusion even worse. And all of this gets polished with a very abrupt editing that simply disorients the viewer. For example, there's a scene with the chase where one of the characters is running and throws something. I had to rewind the scene 3 times to understand what actually happened. He actually threw a sided security guard. It all happens within a couple of seconds, and in a movie theater you could just easily miss it. And sometimes fast editing is used even where it's completely unnecessary. For example, the scene where the characters get out of the car. Nothing special happens, but in 4 seconds, the shot changes 4 times, showing the exact same characters. Such aggressive editing with various camera angles is just unnecessary here. I also have a small complaint about the scene where one of the characters jumps off a tower to reach the ground faster. The CGI in that moment looks honestly very cheap. With a 20 million budget, the scene resembles a moment from the movie Crank, except Crank came out in 2006, not 2025. I know that 20 million isn't a huge budget, but I think they could have done a better job. There's also choppy editing in certain scenes like this one, and just to be clear, it's not that I edited the footage badly, that's exactly how the scene looks in the actual movie. And there's a general problem with the plotline. there's simply a hole or a void in the plot. The police has a very advanced AI system called Spies, which is used to catch the criminals in the final. But at the beginning of the film, this same system suggests a way to intercept the gang, and the police chief turns it off saying something like, "Well, you don't want your phone telling you what to do." That's extremely illogical and stupid, because after seeing what the system can be capable of later in the movie, you realize that if they had used it earlier, the entire story simply wouldn't happen. But overall, the film does a good job at its main task to entertain the audience. Personally, I watched the film for the action, but the surveillance scenes turned out to be interesting as well. The locations are beautiful and atmospheric, which I really appreciate in action movies. There were moments when I was really on the edge of my seat thinking, damn, how the hell are they going to get out of this situation? The resolutions to these scenes are creative and unusual, which is a nice surprise. But the strongest aspect of the film is the action. I especially remember two scenes that are visually stunning. You just sit there and really enjoy it. Of course, the film also tries to include a moral aspect with the message, which is mostly there to make you care about the characters and give them a bit more depth, but it doesn't work very well. And to be clear, I'm not talking about the actors. They're doing a good job, but about the film's characters. There is some drama here, but it's so weak that it simply fades in comparison to the cool visuals and action. The film tries to develop the main characters, but this development isn't strong enough to make us care about them. And so when one of the characters dies, you don't even notice that the character is gone, because they didn't have much screen time and weren't important anyway. The only character I was actually worried about was Jackie Chan's character when he was seriously wounded at the end. But even then, it was more like, there's no way they're just going to kill Jackie. The film presents a moral dilemma: save one person right now, but risk the operation failing, or continue the operation to save more people later, but ignore what is happening at this moment. Following the plot, in the past, Wong tried to save a girl from a drug dealer, which led to the death of his partner, and in the chaos, the girl was kidnapped anyway. In the present, Officer He, it's one of the main characters, saves some girls from being robbed on the street. Wong scolds her for it because she could have ruined the operation, and tells her, better to have regrets than to make a mistake, but in the end, they both admit that they did the right thing in those situations. Well, that seems clear enough. Wong is trying to convey the idea that operations are more important than any emotions, and that emotions and compassion can lead to a tragedy. But at the same time, the film contradicts itself. I mean, in the past, saving the girl led to a tragedy, but in the present, a similar situation is justified despite the same risk of ruining the operation. So the film is basically saying both: don't do anything and you have to do something. In my opinion, by the end, the movie still doesn't give a clear answer. The dilemma is resolved too simply. The film introduces a deep theme but doesn't fully explore it. I understand that this is a difficult question that isn't easy to answer, but in that case, it would have been better to leave the question open so the viewer could think about it. As for the actors, I can say that the performances are good, and the fight scenes are executed very well. Jackie Chan, as always, is great in the role of wise and cheerful mentor, but the actor who stood out to me the most was Tony Leung Ka-fai, who plays the character Fu. His fight scene near the end in the Old Boy movie style, one against the mob, was the most memorable for me. He fit the role of a cold-blooded killer perfectly. Just by looking at him on the screen, you know that this man is dangerous, and because of his performance, some scenes feel much more tense. In the end, I give this film a popcorn movie. It feels like a police operation where the plan seems good, but it's been overcomplicated so much that sometimes it works worse than it could have. The Shadow's Edge is indeed a very cool action movie with the sharp and fairly original action sequences, but because of its many flaws, the overall impression suffers. The main problem, of course, is the editing. Because of it, the film is at times literally hard to watch. That's why it feels a bit disappointing, because I really enjoyed the movie. But in reality, it's carried almost entirely by its action, and you can clearly see that most of the budget went into that. The filmmakers simply overcomplicated things, trying to turn an evening action movie into something bigger than it actually is, by editing a complex plot and drama, but in the end, it feels a bit weak. I understand that this movie won't be for everyone, but I still recommend watching it purely for the action. And that's all. If you really enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and of course, love movies, and watch movies. Bye.